Okay, you guys go first. No? Okay. Marky.
What?
Joke time.
What?
The joke.
You know I don't know any jokes. I'm very unfunny in person.
You're very unfunny in person. Okay, we'll get started. Make sure this is recording. Wait a minute, I need to probably need to make sure that the screen is being captured properly. Okay. Where did my slides go? Alright, I'll just open up a new set. Here. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for making the time to come here on a beautiful Saturday. What a nice weather. So I can't believe you guys decided to spend it here instead, but it's great. So today we're going to be talking about component-driven theming. I'm not going to say that slogan, but the slides URL is down there, and I believe that it's case sensitive, just to make sure that you get the right URL for the slides. I've made some changes to the slides and to this talk from the last time I did it, because a lot of the things that I was going to talk about has already been covered by other speakers throughout the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the slides a little bit quicker and kind of focus more on the coding or the integration part of components in Drupal. I think most people will probably be more interested in that. And if you have anything else that you have questions about as far as some of the processes and things like that, you can probably catch that on one of the other talks, or even a previous version of this talk that I did a couple of weeks ago in LA, which you can find the recording for that right on this sessions page. So there's a YouTube video there that you can actually catch that recording on. So, but I'm probably going to skip a few things just to move on to the more practical things, the more coding and hands-on part of the of this talk. However, I haven't really tested that part too much. So if something breaks, I apologize in advance. And besides Marky, please do not mock me. All right. So, my name is Mario Hernandez. I am a front-end developer for Media Current. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, except I believe like 117 million passwords were just stolen from LinkedIn. Everybody knew that? So, you may not be able to find me anymore, but if you still want to look, I'll probably still be there. This is the agenda for today. We'll be talking about, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Why is everybody talking about components or style guides or pattern labs or KSS Node and all these things? Because all the time this has exploded. It has become one of the trends of front-end development. And I'm going to go over why, some of the reasons why we are doing these things. We'll talk about components, obviously, and what they are, how they work. And we'll talk about advantages, or why you should be doing this. Or why you should consider doing this on a new project, or even an existing project if you're willing to refactor some of the things that you've done in the past. And we'll go over some of the tools, and finally, again, kind of go into a hands-on part of this talk, in which I will show you how a component that was built with Twig, completely outside of Drupal, and it was themed outside of Drupal, can be integrated into Drupal without having to redo the work all over again. And this session we'll be talking about Drupal 8. However, a lot of the principles that we'll be talking about apply to Drupal 7 still, and I can give you some insight on how some of the things can be accomplished in 7. In 7 is not as easy of a transition, but it's still doable. So we can talk about that. Please feel free to interrupt me, except you, Mark.
Seriously, no point
with
in the podcast?
yeah, no. Oh, okay.
Just saying.
Feel free to interrupt me with any questions, please. And what Mark just said, Mark and Rob, they're my colleagues at Media Current. We are a company headquartered in Atlanta. We are all remote. Rob and I come from LA. Mark comes from, I don't know. And Mark, myself, and Bob, who is not here and who usually I like for him to be in my talks because I do mock him. We are also the host of a Media Current podcast that you can subscribe to on iTunes and listen to us argue, as you can imagine. But Media Current has been doing business for a long time. Since 2007, we build large-scale websites. A lot of those websites you are familiar with. You might even use a lot of those websites. We build a lot of the higher ed websites, Stanford, Weather Channel, Butler University, a lot of different ones, Harvard. So we are a distributed team, but we are always looking for talent. So if you are in the lookout for whether it's a front-end development job, back-end development job, project manager, client services, please take a look at our careers page, and hopefully you can find something that appeals to you. So the problem on why, obviously we don't want to just all of a sudden, just because something sounds cool or everybody is doing it, we want to jump and start doing it. There's got to be a reason. At least for me, there's got to be a reason. And one of the biggest reasons for me, and I thought I needed to give you this warning, is that this is one of the reasons for me. Is for some of you, I'll let you get up from the floor. So before I continue. But this is what gives me nightmares at night, and it's unacceptable, really. So, how do we get around this? I've written several blog posts on how to clean up your markup. Jim Birch, who is all the way in the back there, has given some really great talks on producing nicer markup, better, cleaner markup, more semantic markup on Drupal. Highly recommend some of his recordings on that and blog posts. And I've learned actually from his posts on how to do some of the things myself. And so, but I mean, this could be exaggerated, but at the same time it's not, because this was actually an actual project that I worked on. And by the way, we're just trying to print one field here. It's not even an entire website. This is one field. And you can imagine the challenge here is not just that it's a lot of markup that the browser needs to render, but where do you start as a themer or as a front-end person to say, okay, I'm going to use this one selector as my parent for this one field, so I can use that as the top level selector and then work my way down from there. It's hard to do it because a lot of the markup makes absolutely no sense. This markup that you will see in many pages throughout your website, that if you're not careful, you can end up affecting things that you don't want to affect with your design, with your styles. So it's very complicated to be able to create something that you know for sure that is 100% bulletproof, that is not going to break something else when you're trying to style something like this, because the markup is so bad, it's so generic, that it's really hard to single out. But we'll talk about how you can actually get rid of this problem in just a moment. So, you guys, anybody was at the talk recently from Morton? Okay, yeah, he's something else, isn't he? Hope he's not here. But no, but he's worked very hard on trying to get rid of that problem, trying to clean up things for us. One of the ways that we've accomplished that is that we can use the stable theme on Drupal 8. That wipes out a lot of the generic classes that Drupal spits out of the box. So that in itself is a big help there. or you can use, even the classy theme doesn't produce as much as bad a markup as Drupal 7 did. But there's still more work to be done, and components is a great way to approach this problem. It's a great way to clean up our markup. So it's not just Drupal that out of the box that produces some of this bad markup. There's ways also, content source can actually complicate things also, because different content sources can produce different type of markups that is not always consistent among the different content sources. For example, blocks. You create a block. When you look at it on the page, the markup there could be completely different than what a view produces, or what a custom content type produces, or modules. So there's all kinds of things that can affect how the markup is produced in Drupal, and that in turn will affect how you approach theming. As I said before, the ambiguous classes also can be a big problem, because it's hard to know, okay, what class and this bunch of these makes the most sense for me to use, and also where do I put all my styles for this one thing, because based on the class names I wouldn't know where to start, where would I position all my styles for this particular component. So excessive and unnecessary markup obviously is the one thing. So how components work and why components, right? We talked, for those of you who've attended some of the previous talks on components, you've seen that there's huge advantages of using components. There's many ways in which you can build components. There's not one right way. We do it one way at Media Current. Other people may do it a different way. It doesn't mean that either of us is wrong or right. It's just, that's what worked for us. So I would suggest that you look at the different talks and kind of make up your mind on which approach is the one that works for you. So components to me are things that are self-contained, things that can live on their own. They don't depend on any page or any other thing around them to be styled, to behave, or to interact with them. So you can grab a component, and the component can be anything from as simple as a button to a navigation to a slider, and all of that can be one component. So, but you can grab it and put it anywhere on your site, and it will look and behave the same way regardless of where it's placed. So that's what a component to me is. In the past, we used to theme websites where things will be depending on what page is this thing available on. If it's on this page, it should look like this. If it's on this other page, why does it look different? So that thinking doesn't work anymore. One of the other issues that we had in the past is that we have to wait for backend development to be done for us to start theming something. And by the time the theming was due, we will get something from backend developers that was not theme friendly, because the markup that we were getting was not what we wanted or what we needed. And part of that was probably our fault, because we never, backend developers, they don't know what markup you need as a themer. So it's a process of communication. So now we are having that communication with backend developers through our style guide. We can ahead of time proactively create these components, style them, make them look and behave the way they are intended to, and along with that comes the markup that those components need. So the backend developers now look at that markup and do their backend work using that markup. So it's a great way, and we'll go into more detail about that. So again, components are self-contained or can be a combination. Here is an example of something that was combination of different things. Each of these pieces is a component. The hero image here is a component, the filter bar, the tile, image tile, and the button. We can move these things around and they will look and behave the exact same way regardless of where they are. We can move this up or move this down, or we can move this to a whole different page, and that's not going to affect how they look or how they behave unless you intend for that to happen. If you want this on the home page to look and behave this way, but on another page you wanted to maybe the text to be different color, this to be blue and this to be orange, then there's ways you can do that without having to recreate the component all over again. So we'll go over that in a little minute. So here's the heading component, the hero. Here's this the filter bar, the media item we call it, and the button. So those are all individual components. Each of these has a specific name, a unique name, by which you go about styling that component. And what that does, it prevents regressions on your design, on your styles, because when you address a component, you're addressing that one thing with that specific name, so there's no risk of you breaking something else, because nothing else on your site should have the same name. So that's just the bottom line, that's the concept. So this button, as you can imagine, the class is button. So there's nothing else on the site that will have that class like button. So anywhere we apply this class of button to, whether it's a div or an anchor, it will automatically look like this. So let's skip that. That's my friend Bob that I was telling you about. One of those is my friend Bob, by the way. So I'm not sure if you can guess which one. And by the way, I play around with Bob, but he's obviously a great guy. He is the creator of the weekly drop. So if you're not subscribed to the weekly drop, I would highly recommend you subscribe. It's a nice newsletter that you get every week with all the latest Drupal news. So, and I swear he did not pay me to say that. Just to be sure. So, some advantages of components. So let's break it down. As I mentioned before, markup. Markup to me is the biggest win, because I have full control of what the markup is. I'm not longer depending on Drupal's default markup. And media current, we use the BEM approach for naming classes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with BEM. BEM stands for Block Element Modifier, and that is a way for you to associate the different elements of, in this case, a component, so that you know that they're all related with each other. So just by looking at an element's class, you can know exactly where that component, where that element belongs, or where those styles are located based on that name, and we'll see that in just a minute. So here is an example of a component. This is what we call a media item, and this is something that we use throughout the entire website, this one project that we're working on. But we don't have to recreate this every time we need it. We simply reuse it over and over and over. In fact, one of the advantages that I don't mention here is that the longer we worked on this project, the less new components we were building, because we were reusing the components that we had already built. And you'll see in a minute how that works. So here is a component that it's got an image, it's got some kind of label or type, and a title. Right? That's a typical, and that's what the markup looks like. So not only, it's cleaner, but it has the right elements, HTML markup, as far as divs, H5, H4, whatever markup is required for that particular component, but it also has the right classes. So everything is called media item. The whole thing is media item, and within the media item you have the image, you have the text, within the text you have the type and the title. So you can tell that are all related, because everything starts with the media item. So no matter where this particular component is, if you want to find out where are the styles for this component, you know exactly where to go on your theme structure. You will find a CSS style sheet there called media item. And that's where all the styles for this one component are. So this component can be placed anywhere. It's not depending on anything else around it. It will always look and behave this way. But as I said before, there are ways in which you can alter things. If I want this text to change different color on a different page, I can add what is called a modifier class to my component. So when I add it to a different page, I can say blue text as an example, and then I will have a CSS style that will have a blue text style for when that class exists. And I'll show you in a minute how that works. But this is as simple as it gets. And if you think of a button, it will be the class button with everything else inside of it and anything else. So pretty straightforward. Not only this is good for a themer, but if you think about it, for SEO, search engine optimizations, Google loves this, because this has meaning. It's telling the browser what the content is inside this particular component, versus what we saw earlier, where I didn't have a clue what was in here, because there's absolutely no description, there's no meaning of what this is compared to what we've done there. Any questions about it? Yes.
So I noticed there's some I'd say consider additional divs. Is it something like there's Drupal with so many that the backend developer said we're not gonna instead of having a div that reps an image, that class goes straight to the image? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can do that too.
Is this a limitation of just
Sure.
Drupal getting a feel out of the backend, or is it just you prefer to have a wrapper did around the image?
It depends on what it is. In the case of this component here, and I'm sorry, let me repeat that question, because the question was, should there be a wrapper around the image, or should the image itself have be the one with the class of, media item image in this case? Right. Okay, and same with the other elements. The reason we have a wrapper is because we want to be able to grab this thing as a unit. It's all together, one thing. If we remove the wrapper that you see there at the very top, and we only apply the image, the classes to the elements itself, then this thing kind of breaks apart.
I don't mean the wrapper around the whole thing, just the wrapper around the image.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, that's definitely a way to even streamline the markup even more. Right. So you can get rid of the media item underscore image wrapper and add that class to the image itself, the image style. Sure.
Okay, that was
Yeah, okay.
I was
Yeah.
wondering if the backend developers were just like tired of trying to strip out all the arrays, and there's like Drupal's just giving us this, we can't get rid
No,
of
no,
it.
no.
Have to deal with it, or?
Well, there may be a case when backend developers may have that the thought. One of the things that we've done is we're on the same page with backend developers. We're saying this is the approach we're taking, and everybody pretty much goes along with that. So if somebody has a problem, something that we have to talk about it and probably fire him or something. Somebody ask a question? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. How would I
Structure the markup.
Okay, yeah, sure. Good question. How would I structure the markup? What we do is for every piece, every component that you see here, we have a Twig template. And that's where the markup is written. And then I will show you later how you can grab that component, Twig template, and bring it into Drupal to allow for Drupal to see that component that you've created. But yeah, the answer is on your Twig template is when you clean up the markup. So advantages, reusable components. As you saw there, we can grab one piece, put it anywhere we want, so we can continue to reuse those, and that saves time because we don't have to rebuild things over and over and over again. As you see here, front and backend developers benefit from this because, as we saw before, backend developers, they would just build something and give it to us, and markup was a mess sometimes. Now we hear comments that from backend developers to say, what, it's great because now I can actually see what I'm building before I even build it, because you guys already themed the component. It's already there for me to see on the style guide, and I can actually see things as I'm building. I can actually see them in action, their behavior or the look and feel. Okay, this was reversed, but here's the example of another component, a quote. So we tell the backend developers, can you create something that will give us this quote, and here's the markup. So they simply look at this and they just produce something for us that resembles that. And because we already styled this ahead of time, as soon as they build it in Drupal and give it the right classes, it's done in Drupal. Clients, one of the benefits that we never thought about it is that the clients, they actually, because we have a style guide that catalogs all the different components that we build, they don't care that these things have not been done in Drupal yet. They go to the style guide and they start even their QA process there. They can see how things are going to look, how things are going to behave. They don't care that, again, that the backend developers may still be working on Drupal on those same components, but the style guide shows them exactly how things are, how things look, and how they behave, because we have everything capsulated into a single item. So in our theme, you will see a component for a quote, for example, and so there is a Twig file for that, for the markup. There is a JSON file for all the variables or the different fields that we want to include on that component. There is the style sheet to style and make it look the way it's supposed to look, but it's also the JavaScript there, all in one place. So you can actually grab this component from one theme and put it on another theme without having to rewrite it, because it's all encapsulated into one thing. And everything that you need, all the assets, if it requires any images or any other type of asset, are all in the same folder. So you can grab this folder, move it from one theme to another. So instant gratification, because as a client or even as a developer, I can see already how things are coming along on my project by looking at the style guide and see what things are going to be look. Here are just some of the tools. You've seen this throughout the day. A lot of people use different tools. This is what we use, with the exception of Pattern Lab. We use KSS Node instead for our style guide. And I'll show you an example of the style guide that we use. But these are our combination. We have a theme generator that creates a theme for us. We have our npm commands that we use for compiling our CSS and our minifying our JavaScript and creating our style guide. And then our style guide is what gives us the catalog of the different elements that we are building. So let me show the style guide. Here's an example of a simple, piece of the style, which is the brand colors for this particular project. Here's an example of another component. Pretty straightforward. The client comes to the style guide, they see this component, they say, yeah, it looks exactly how we want it. We can click here and expand it, collapse it, and they don't care that this is not in Drupal. They just want to make sure that this looks and behaves the way they intended it to from their design. Here's another way, another combination of those media items that I talked before. Again, we can put them anywhere around any other components, and they're not going to be broken in any way. So these slides are on my presentation page, so you can grab the URL there. That is a great talk on components from Lullabot, Mark Drummond. He did a great job on this, so I highly recommend you watch that. I'm going to show you now some of the demos on how to build these components, how to put them all together and integrate them within Drupal. Unless you have any questions, I can jump into that now. Sorry if I'm going fast, but again, a lot of this already all the people cover it, and there's also a recording of this previous talk where I go into a little slower about this. Yes.
I noticed on one of the examples of the style guide, it looked like you had a page with multiple components. Is that something that you're able to do in KSS?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
In fact, let me show you that now. It's a good segue there too. This is what we're going to be building today, but I'm going to show you.
Missing a slash.
So here is the style guide. Let me to the top. Okay, so here's our style guide, and you have a lot of things like base, for things like button typography and things like that. So you saw this from Chaz this morning, I believe. I'm going to focus on the components category. This is where the majority of your work will be stored, on the components, because that's what you're building. You're building components. So instead of clicking each one of those, I'm just going to scroll and show you how each of these components looks. So here you can see, here's again, the names need to be specific, need to be unique, so they don't collapse with other components that you have in your page. In this case, in this particular project, we were great because we worked with the design team that provided us with the design mockups, but also they provided us with a great UX document where they broke down all the different components, they assigned names to them, so we didn't have to spend much time on that. But if you are the one responsible for assigning names to your components, make sure that they do make sense, that the rule is whatever name you assign to your components, your style sheet should also reflect that. And also the first selector on your style sheet should start with that same name. That just keeps things very well organized, and I'll show you in a minute how those styles look for us on a project like this. So if I scroll, you can see that I might have broken some of this. No, so even the JavaScript works, as you can see there. So here are different ways on how we are building. All of this were built individually, and by compiling it into a style guide, we can showcase them this way. So this is what I was talking about, how the clients can come and see the style guide and see how things are progressing for their project. They can focus on QA one thing at a time. They don't have to be overwhelmed by a QA process that covers the entire page. Obviously, at some point, they want to go into Drupal and see everything in place the way it's supposed to be, but having to individually QA a component, I think, makes it easier for them, because they can focus on that one component to make sure that it it looks and behaves the way it's intended. Here's the same media item component that I mentioned. This time we've moved it up into the hero area, and we've added some text at the bottom. So these are things that you can do. The sliders, obviously, everything that you see here is works as you expected. Here are other things, and all of this obviously is responsive. So that's the other thing that you normally don't get from a mockup. You won't be able to show the client that how the responsive part of this works. But as you can see, it's all of this is responsive.
What's used to generate this particular set of pages and the indexing and all that? Is that
Yeah, let me go into that now. This is called a style guide that is built by using Twig, using KSS Node, or in some cases you can use Pattern Lab. We opt for KSS Node. It's worked really well for us, but we don't object to using Pattern Lab. In fact, I'll probably start looking into it a little bit more closely myself, because I did see a few things that I liked this weekend that I like to be able to do with our process. So as you can see here, things do what they're supposed to do, and so that's what.
Are there any glitches of taking what you create in Twig and something like Pattern Lab and move it to Drupal side, or do you just copy and can you just paste them in there and it'll continue to work, or are there considerations from doing the visual side of it?
Yeah, the question is whether there is any issues when you bring in your components into Drupal. Any considerations? We found very little issues with that. Again, because Drupal is matching the markup that we want, but there will be times when you will need to do things in Drupal to do the final touches, because maybe Drupal has a specific needs on how something should look or where it should be positioned, like main navigation, for example. We can create the main navigation as a component in the style guide, but in Drupal it should stick, it should do something. Maybe it should not overlap with the admin toolbar or something like that. So that's something that you have to do in Drupal, but it's very minimal if you do it the right way. In our case, the navigation does everything that it's supposed to do for us. So for example, see, this is the style guide, but it works the way you expected it to work right here in the style guide. So in Drupal, we may have to position things a little bit more carefully, just so when the admin toolbar is available, it doesn't conflict with it or something like that. But yeah. So.
And then in terms of workflow from the front end to the back end, how is Media Current kind of handle that with respect to client view and sign off when you're going to move from the front to the back? I mean, is this what you're talking about? It seems like it may be less apt to be able to iterate around. It's not like when you take this stuff and you push it across, it sort of stays on the Drupal side, right? Can the designers still continue to work on this?
Oh yes, yeah. So iterations. What we do is with Drupal it's great because we're using Twig, and so once we build a component, we don't have to redo it again in Drupal. We just let Drupal know about this component, and I'll show you in a minute how that is done. But if anything changes, if the client changes their mind about something, and they say, no, you know what, I want to change the way this looks or where this button is located, we go to the style guide and change it there. And because Drupal is using the same styles that the style guide, then the same changes will apply to Drupal automatically. Yeah. So those are good questions. Let me quickly go over real quick. Any other questions? What time are we supposed to be out of here, by the way? Anybody knows? 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Should have known it's Marky. 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Really?
12 minutes, yeah.
Is there anything else after this? Because I'd love to, I'll love to spend all night here talking about it.
There's another one after this.
Okay. Let me show you. I don't know if I still have this. I've been. Bad couple of 61. Okay. I just want to quickly show you the structure of the theme. Maybe if I do this here. Okay, so here are, can you guys see this? Okay, so this is the components folder within our theme, right? And your theme can be structured any way you want. It doesn't have to really follow this way of structuring it. Normally we split our theme into a source folder and a distribution folder. So everything that we work on is within the source folder, and then everything is compiled and moved into a distribution, and that's what we push to the server. So, but each of the folders that you see here is a component. Each of those components that we just saw on the style guide is coming from here, like 404 intro text, for example. All content grid, which is the first one you saw was all those little images that you saw on a grid, is this one here. And as I said before, we have our Twig template. We have our JSON, which is what provides the variables that we need, or the fields that we need to for building that particular component. And this is just static at the moment. Then we have our styles to style, to make those things look the way they look. In the styles guide, in the styles sheet is where you specify where this component lives within the style guide here, and where the source markup is here. And when you compile this, that's how it knows to position it here within the components folder, because we're saying components here. Also, we have the JavaScript. Any JavaScript that is needed, this is the Drupal JavaScript that is needed. This is a behaviors JavaScript file, is here. So this is how you can grab this component and take it anywhere to either a different theme. Unless you have dependencies from other libraries, then you have to make sure that you have those available. Otherwise, you can just grab this, move it to a different theme, and still have that component work and behave in the same way it does. The one thing that I wanted to focus on is obviously the JSON. So this is a JSON object that we have here. And this is just for building our static component on the style guide. So we can theme it and we can make it look the way it's supposed to look. When we move this to Drupal, we still have these variables here, but we'll replace all the content of this with actual Drupal fields. So while the components are sitting on the style guide with static content, when we migrate that to Drupal, Drupal feeds the actual data from Drupal by replacing this static content with the Drupal fields that we're using. And I'll show you just now how that's done. Any questions about that? Okay. So basically what we do is we use the components library module, which is I'm not an expert at that module, but the simplest term is the components library module allows for Drupal to be able to identify those components that you build on the style guide and be able to use them. And we use that and to be able to include what we build into our Drupal templates. I'll show you in just a minute how that is done. So I'm going to so anyway, so all of these components are here, and you can see that some of them have JavaScript, some don't. Some are just a simple HTML style sheet. But the most common thing that you'll see is the Twig file, the JSON file, and the style sheets. In some cases you will see the JavaScript, obviously. And so now let me go here. So I have a simple site that I built for this demo. Again, this is not something that I've tested too much. I have the so here is the components, right? And I have this, what I call this card, a card. And the nice thing about KSS Node and even Pattern Lab, from what I saw this morning, is that you can show here and you can show the markup that makes up this component. So here's everything that you. So as a developer, if a backend developer comes and I said, okay, can you build this for us in Drupal? they come to the style guide and they say, okay, I see what markup I need to build this in Drupal. So they know exactly what markup is needed, and as long as they build that and they use the same markup, that's it. It's done. We don't have to do anything else in Drupal for that component. It's done. So that's the first part of moving that into Drupal. The next part is to be able to tell Drupal that we have a component where all the markup exists, and to use that and wrap that with Drupal fields. So I'll show you that now. So we have our Badcamp source components, right? I have the card component here, and here's my markup. So the markup is pretty self-explanatory, right? Wrappers and different elements. What you see, all those Twig variables, they're coming from the JSON file that we have. So we're just printing those there. And sometimes you have to do a for loop, sometimes you don't. It all depends, right? If you notice on line 17, see how I have the Twig classes pipe default? This is what I was talking about before, is that you can use this component any way you want. If you want to use it on a, let's say on the contact us page, and you want the text to be different color, you can, when you include this component on that page, you can say add this class to this component. You can say text blue or text red as a class, and then you will have your CSS styles already in place for that class. So you can basically dynamically pass those classes to this component without having to rewrite the whole thing. You simply modifying an existing component by making changes, and I'll show you how that's done. So pretty straightforward. The markup here is maybe a little confusing. We have a column 1 and column 2. This is because we were splitting things into left and right. That's all that is. But the main thing is the individual pieces, like this for loop here. We're going through the social media items, and we loop through those, and that's how we're able to print the different icons that you see for social media. So this here, these 3 icons here, that's all that is. So now let me show you the Drupal side of this, because we have the component build, but Drupal still doesn't know about this. Even though it's in Twig, Drupal still doesn't know anything about it. And that's where the components library module comes in. You install that component, the module, you enable it, and now you can create a namespace for your components. By creating a namespace, now you can tell Drupal, use this namespace, which means you go into the components folder and you can read those components from there. I'm sure it's more technical than that, but that's kind of the bottom line of that. And so when I go to my Gulp file, which is what we use for our tasks, for running, for compiling Sass, for compiling JavaScript, or minifying JavaScript, and compiling our style guide, there is a namespace here that you will see. Things like that namespace, Badcamp. So I have this namespace now for my theme that Drupal is aware of now, and this namespace is configured to look into my source components folder, right? So when I want to include my components into Drupal, what I've done in this particular case is I created a paragraph type with each of those fields that you see here: the name, the picture, the biography, the social media icons. It's just a paragraph type, nothing special about it. So in order for me to change, so this is Drupal here, that's the same component. Let me show you the by using the debugger, right? If you turn on Twig debugging on, you can actually see which templates are being used. So by default, we are using a paragraph template, right? This is the template that we are using here, and I created a suggestion, right, template that's called paragraph -- card. So now I'm using my own custom template for this particular component. Okay, and so if I go to my templates folder, I look for that template that I created, and it's here. This is just a copy of the regular template file that comes with the template module, right, with the paragraph module. And all I'm doing here, ignore this for now, we'll go over this in a minute. All I'm doing here is I am including the component that I already built. right? And here is the namespace. That's where the namespace comes in handy. I'm saying Bandcamp, and already Bandcamp is already plugged into my source components folder, right? And then I'm passing the name of that component, the Twig template of that component. So that's the first step, is saying go grab this component and include it on my paragraph, my custom paragraph template. So the next thing is I have these variables that are in my component. But in my component, those variables are using static content. You saw those from the JSON file, right? This time, we're replacing that with Drupal fields names. Okay? And remember when I said that you can actually pass a class to a component if you want to modify it somewhere else? So if, let's say on this page I wanted to change something about the component, I'm passing this class here. Car, no socials. Like in this case would be, I want to hide the social media icons. In fact, I can probably just remove this class from here. I can do that, right? But this is just an example that you can pass any class. So when this component is rendered, it'll say card, space, card, no social as the classes of that component in Drupal. And you already will have some styles that say, you know, social display none or something like that. So that's one thing, right? So we're now bringing the component into Drupal. This here is just a loop. Basically an array that I did in order to have a cleaner way of integrating the social media icons here. Instead of having all of this here, I did it separately, and now I'm just passing this class here, so it's cleaner right here. You also see where it says attach library. On Drupal, obviously libraries are huge and they're really great to work with. For every component that we build a library in Drupal. And so here's my library. I don't have it. This is just an example. No, that's not it. Here. Okay. So I built a card library that has this JavaScript because to collapse and expand the biography on the person. And then it's got this dependencies like this. This is a mixing and this other here. This I actually need to modify. I don't think I ever modified this. This is supposed to be. It's supposed to be card CSS and this there. That's how this library should look. Basically, I'm saying for this library card, this is where all the styles are, and this is where the JavaScript is, which I can also bring here on the same card component. I did this in a rush, so forgive me for that. And so now, that's how I'm able to attach that library here. The advantage of doing this in library is that I don't have to load CSS that I don't need anywhere else. I don't have to load on every page, right? This component may only show up on one page on my entire site. So I just want to load those styles and that JavaScript on that one page instead of loading it on every single page on my website. What else should I talk about? So going back to the component itself, I did break it because I had it working and then I broke it. But so here's the component. Obviously, as I said before, responsive. So all of this works, and you see the markup here. In Drupal, I think I broke the collapsing part. Yeah, I broke it. I missed something. But as you can see, I didn't have to rewrite this in Drupal again. In fact, one of the questions that I asked this morning, the chat is, why you have to repeat in your markup? We are avoiding that because instead of having to repeat the markup in the paragraph template, I'm just including the component that I already have built, and I don't have to repeat the markup. The only thing I need to do now is replace those fields with Drupal fields. Yes, Jim.
Why not just have the paragraph template in your style guide?
I'm sorry?
Why not just have the paragraph template in your style guide? Right now you have two components.
Right.
So there's no way to join them.
Well, Drupal doesn't know about the component template
Okay.
because it's not part of Drupal. That is just part of the style guide.
One other reason is that if you do it the way that Mario has done it, you can name the template based on what works for you and your team. Like he's named it card, and so that makes sense to everyone working on the project. Drupal, as we all know, has its own specific naming
Right.
conventions.
may or may not jive with the way that your mental model is for that. So that's the reason why you can actually Yeah, that's another excellent point is that the style guide is completely independent of Drupal, so every time people can work on it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly, and that's exactly what we do. We in fact, in the past, we used to have to wait for backend development to be done before we can start theming. Now we start ahead of backend development, and we can focus on the style guide. In fact, this project that I show you here, I think 90% of the theming was done completely outside of Drupal. I didn't have to touch Drupal at all. And during all that time, backend development was going on simultaneously, and we never had any issue, any conflicts, or anything like that. And when you have your entire team, adhered by this name standard, it becomes easy. Just a couple weeks ago, I was given a ticket to work on this one component. They said, here's what it should look like. And it was a list of things. I didn't go to the style guide. I just said, let me try this. I built the component myself. I just applied the classes that I thought I would need to apply. And when I previewed, it was exactly the way it's supposed to look. When I went and looked at the markup, it was exactly what I had written because we are all on the same page. So that's a huge advantage. I was kind of removed from this project like 2 weeks earlier before we launch because all the front end has been completed, and I've never seen that before. Usually at the end of the project is when things get crazy, where you have to work long hours and things. This is the first time where they said, Mario, we're gonna lower it from 40 hours a week. We're gonna just have you 4 hours a week now for the next 2 or 3 weeks until we launch. I mean, that's unbelievable. I miss working on that, but okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I can hear the fan here. I can't hear you.
How many places are you meeting to manage?
How many places? One page. Our goal process does everything for us. It does everything. The files, our tabs, JavaScript, we break the images, we compile the style guide. Yeah. So everything that we need to do is inside that component folder. And then just a couple of work commands like whack or run or something like that. So everything is right. Well, I'm not sure if we're out of time or not, but I'd be happy to answer questions. If not, yes.
So if you're going to use a component on multiple projects, the same card, but it's going to have different CSS on 3 different projects, how do you handle doing the stats?
Oh, well, no, I mean, what I said is that the component becomes portable to the point that you can move it from one project to another, but I would never use one component, and although you can have specific patterns, like all the people talked about it, is if you have things for typography, for buttons and things like that, you can reuse them over and over, but a component that you are using for a different project, you obviously have to maintain it on that particular project, so but you have to rebuild it from scratch.
It's going to look the same, or
it depends on the project. If they want it to look like this on 3 different websites, then it will look like that. Yeah.
Okay. But you have to redo the CSS every time. But you have a basis to start.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. You have to start from scratch. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
So do you have a repo for the Gulp build?
No, but I can do that. In fact, I'll try to do that tonight. You can follow me on Twitter, and I'll post a link there.
Okay.
If you like.
Yeah, because I mean, the reason why I asked you is because right now I've got a similar kind of thing, but it's split up between buttons and front and sass